Last week in 1 John chapter 2, we saw some introductory verses for the subject of sin and overcoming sin, which most of the rest of the book of John, including what has already come before that, or 1 John that is on that subject. Those verses last week, verses 12 through 14, introduced us to how to overcome sin by knowing God and having the Word of God abiding in us. We spent a while on that last week. For those of you online, we apologize that we weren't online last week, but that was not possible for us. But tonight we move straight ahead into where that battle truly begins in earnest in verses 15 through 17. Let's read those verses. 1 John 2, verses 15 through 17. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. The reason this battle is such a tough one to fight is, this battle against the world and the things that are in the world, is because of the deceit of Satan. That is the entire root of that battle for the child of God. Now, how is that? Jesus said in John 8:44 that Satan is a liar and the father of it, of lies. And much of his lying about the world and about the things that are in the world involve, well, look, everybody's doing it. I mean, if it really was wrong, you don't think that they would all be doing it, do you? He makes it look normal to do the things that are of the world, which is why it's called the world. Because most everyone does seem to be doing those things. But yet, look at the last line of chapter 5 in verse 19. The last line of chapter 5 in verse 19, it says, "The whole world lieth in wickedness." You see it there? What does the first line say? And we know that we are of God, and the whole world lieth in wickedness. In other words, there's supposed to be a real difference between us and everyone else in the world. Now, it may not always seem to us like the whole world lieth in wickedness, does it? Doesn't always look like that. And not everything they do is bad. The reason it doesn't look like wickedness to us is because it seems so normal to us. It seems so normal because everybody's doing it. Everybody dresses like that. They all wear those clothes. Which isn't a bad argument on Satan's part, because he's got even professing believers doing what God called an abomination, mixing the genders up, even if it's nothing more than just the articles of clothing they wear. It's the deceit of Satan. And we see so many people doing whatever things it is. That's why it's called the world. But God doesn't look at the same things we look at. Nor does he see things the same way we see them. And even if he was not right, the Bible tells us that he will still be the judge, the righteous judge. A whole bunch of verses all throughout the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, tells us that he will judge the world in righteousness. Meaning, he is right. He'll do it right. He'll do it the way it ought to be done. Now, he has a way better viewpoint than we do. He sits far above the world while we sit right in the middle of it, out of necessity. And he sees it for what it is, while we see it for what everybody's doing. Oh, well, this is normal. I guess this is all right. He sees it for what it really is, and therefore he has the proper knowledge to say that the whole world lieth in wickedness. Which is why he says in James 4:4 that the world is his enemy. Now remember the first line in chapter 5 and verse 19? What was that line again? We are of God. And then by contrast, the whole world lieth in wickedness. That brings us back to chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, where it tells us to love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. Now the world, love not the world seems there, but the things that are in the world, those are more particular. The world is a vague thing. The things that are in the world are particular. And verse 16 gives us 3 particular categories of the world's things that we're going to take a look at tonight. And I don't know about you, but I've heard many, many sermons on these verses, and this isn't meant to be a sermon, but a Bible study. And I've heard just the shortest number of examples of what is being talked about in these things. I'm going to try to do that tonight and give a number of examples of each of these. But the first category of the things of the world is the lust of the flesh. Now, that's the easiest one for us all to recognize and know what it is. But those are the things which appeal to the flesh. Now, what did the Lord say about our flesh? Yeah, that. There's some other things too, he said about our flesh. You remember?
You love the flesh, you don't love God.
That's the world, which the flesh is part of the world. He said, pardon?
I say it describes the three sources of temptation in the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the 3 things we are supposed to be reckoning ourselves to be dead indeed unto. Well, the devil, sin, kind of the same difference. But he said in Romans 7:18, in my flesh dwelleth no good thing. So what are some of those worldly things that appeal to the flesh? How about tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs? They're all drugs. They all affect your mind, including marijuana. They all do, and any drug user who is being honest about it will admit it. I mean, you can drink alcohol and not right away tell what it's doing to your mind, but it's clouding your judgment. And if you drink enough, you end up doing things that you would have never done otherwise if you'd not been drinking. Marijuana does the same thing. They say, well, it's all I can think of as innocent, harmless. Well, it feels like it until you've done enough of it, and then it does the same thing to you that cocaine does. I mean, it doesn't have the same immediate danger of death that drugs like cocaine and heroin have, but these things all are part of the lust of the flesh. Why do people use them? Because their flesh wants them, or as it truly feels to them, their flesh needs this. And it honestly feels to them like they cannot go without it, including marijuana, just to toss that in. Got medical statistics to prove that with. But these things get into your flesh and they won't let go. It's the lust of the flesh. And then adultery and fornication. God said in Proverbs 6:32 that those that do that destroy their own soul. And we see that, well, let me think of how to word what I'm trying to say here. The world sees adultery and fornication, for the most part, as at the very least acceptable. That's why Hollywood has so much of it in their movies. Even in the Disney movies, they're not showing the act, but they're promoting the godlessness of LGBTQ, and very openly about it too. But the world sees it as acceptable. They think of people who don't do it as weird. That's another point to be made. Let me go right to that. The world's entertainment is the lust of the flesh. It's full of these things, full of bad language and so many other things. Even on TV. When I was a kid, and we didn't even have a TV when I was a kid, and partly because of this, but mainly because of these things. I remember going to the elementary school library to watch the astronauts on the moon. We didn't have a TV to watch, and I remember for quite a while there, a few years, we'd go to watch I remember it being mainly the astronauts coming back to Earth and landing in the ocean. I remember having a TV for a short while there. It was kept in the closet just to keep it out of the way. And I remember it being pulled out, and I don't know if we had the coat hangers on the thing to get the signal in with not, but we watched the astronauts landing in the ocean there. But the reason we didn't ever watch much TV is because we didn't need to see those things, be under those influences. But even back then, when I was a child, they didn't allow the language on TV, just regular old TV shows that are commonplace now. It's hard to find even a funny guy, a comedian, that isn't swearing. It's the lust of the flesh, the entertainment. It's fleshly stuff. Here's another altogether different side of it. The lust of the flesh, laziness. That's a segment of the lust of the flesh. It can be appealing for many to not work. And I can't tell you how many times I've been told up and down 5th Street and 6th Street and all over Calumet and Laurium, down in Hancock too. People being proud, never worked a day in their life. And as the one fellow said, I've never worked a day in my life and don't intend to start now. They're all proud that they get free money for not working. From Social Security disability, which I don't think anybody ought to get that if they didn't pay into Social Security. That should be for those people who paid in. But laziness, it appeals to the flesh. We could get into several sub-points under that, like a love of sleep and whatnot. It's part of the lust of the flesh. Partying is another one. God warns against things such as that in Galatians 5:21. Calls partying by the name revelings. So those are a few examples of the lust of the flesh. In the Bible, we see men like Samson and King David as examples. King Samson, well, both of those men couldn't keep their hands off the women. Samson, he was a Nazarite from before he was even born. And his was a lifelong Nazariteship, to coin another new word. He kept defiling his vows over and over and over and over and over again. Such as when he killed that lion, when he took his mom and dad down to whatever Philistine city it was on that occasion to meet a woman that he wanted them to get her as a wife for him. He killed that lion that tried to attack him, killed him with his bare hands. And then on the next trip down, he turned aside, it says there in Judges, to see the carcass of the lion and found that the bees had made a nest in there and made a swarm of honey. Or it made a bunch of honey in there. So Samson, this isn't usually brought out. I have heard it a few different times, but he defiled his Nazariteship by taking honey out of that carcass and eating it. Taking it, it says he took it in his hand. He must have had something in his hand that it was in, because it wouldn't have lasted until he got to the city. But he shared that. Defiling his vows from the lust of the flesh. David was legendary for his lust of the flesh. And both of those men ultimately paid huge prices for their lust. Look with me at 1 Peter chapter 2. It's just a couple of pages, a few pages over from where we're at. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 11. Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. Now, I've heard that explained away so it doesn't mean a thing by removing that comma there. Saying, well, I don't think that smoking wars against the soul. Well, I don't think that whatever form of fleshly lusts war against the soul. But the comma puts all the difference in the world there. Abstain from fleshly lust, comma, which war against the soul. Now, if it was just the particular ones that you think war against the soul, then there'd be no comma there. Abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. But it says, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. So that's the lust of the flesh there. Number 2 is the lust of the eyes. The lust of the eyes, the things that your eyes see or fantasize about and imagine seeing. Now, I could use a good thing that doesn't fall under the same idea, at least I don't believe it does, of the church building I want God to give us. Every time I pass by it, I pray and ask God to give it to us. That's not a sinful thing. It is a good thing, something that we need, but I'm imagining seeing our church in that building. By the way, the word lust is defined as longing or desire. It doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing just by itself, because as I believe Galatians says, the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit lusteth against the flesh. So the Spirit of God is even lusting. It's desiring for us to follow Christ. It's longing for us to follow Christ. I say it is. He is. But some examples of the lust of the eyes here. I mentioned adultery and fornication a few moments ago with the lust of the flesh, but that can also be the lust of the eyes. Take, for example, pornography, or looking at women dressed immodestly. And it's not just looking at women now, it goes both ways these days, it seems like. Been for a long time now. But there's the lust of the eyes right there. You get a lot of overlap between these different categories here. But looking at pornography, you wouldn't have that temptation there if you weren't seeing it or thinking about seeing it. And then women dressed immodestly draws men's attention. It does. Now, of course, the man is the one universally in entertainment. Like I said, there can be a good bit of overlap between the lust of the flesh and the lust of lust. So entertainment has the lust of the eyes as well. How about gambling? Lottery tickets. The casino. It's all kind of the same difference as far as the idea of gambling goes. Now, if you go to a casino, there's a lot more evil in there than just the gambling. But it often is and will turn into a lust for wealth. The lust of the eyes. You're imagining seeing yourself winning. I've told the story before, not in quite a while, I don't think, about the one fellow that used to ride our transit buses. I guess it's okay to say this, but he lived at Lakeview Manor, and I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 times a day he would call for a bus to take him from Lakeview Manor to what is now the Christ Station, there by the corner of Quincy and South Lincoln in Hancock. And he'd go in and buy lottery tickets and then take the bus back home. It cost him $2.50 each way, and he'd do that 4 or 5 or 6 times a day. One day, I was the one that went to pick him back up from the gas station, and he came out the door, and this fellow hardly ever said anything. He had some mental problems, but he came out and he was jumping up and down, got on the bus. I just won $20 with the lottery ticket. First thing that crossed my mind is, you spend a whole lot more than that on bus fares getting back and forth to buy lottery tickets, plus whatever the lottery tickets cost. You lost money, buddy. But it's gambling. Can be the lust of the eyes. Stealing as well. You see it, and you want it, and you take it. Covetousness in general. Covetousness in general is the lust of the eyes. Even without taking it, it's wrong. The 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not covet. Colossians 3:5. Turn there with me. Colossians 3:5. Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence. Notice mortify there means put them to death. Kill them. Get rid of them. And covetousness, which is what? Idolatry. That makes it pretty serious with God. Covetousness is idolatry. How is that? Because idolatry, typically back in those days, and we still have it in religion today all over the world, including Catholicism, you have something you can see, or if you're allowed to, I don't know if you are allowed to, that you can touch and feel and bow down to. They pray to them. That's basically what you're doing when you're coveting something. You're wanting it. Now, idolatry is your desire is toward that God of that idol. The idol is typically just a substantiation of a god, and like Baal, they had many different images of Baal. But it wasn't the image that was said to be the god, but it was a substantiation of that god. And covetousness is us doing the same thing with whatever it is we're desiring as they did with those idols. We're, to a degree, worshiping it. I want it. It's desire, it's lust, and it is sin. In the Bible, we see men such as Jacob and Solomon who dealt with the lust of the eyes. Jacob took his brother's birthright out of covetousness. His brother had something he wanted, and he really wanted it. He went to some great degrees to get it, too. And Solomon, he said, "And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them." That's in Ecclesiastes 2:10. And what did he find out by doing so? That it was all but vanity and vexation of spirit. It's the lust of the eyes. There, look at Luke 11:34. Luke 11:34. Examples of the lust of the eyes and people that we see who had these lusts, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Luke 11 and verse 34. The light of the body is what? The eye. Wherefore, when thine eye is single, that is focused on the Lord and good things, thy whole body also is full of light. But when thine eye is evil, thy body also is full of darkness. That's what God thinks of the lust of the eyes. Very quickly, our time's gone here, but number 3 is the pride of life. The pride of life. A few examples are, I deserve whatever, you name it. I deserve it. New car, new house, more money. I deserve whatever it is you feel that you are owed. I hear that so often with welfare things. They think I can live on this? And some of them are making more for doing nothing than I make working. But I used to hear it on the bus all the time, Thomas. I'm sure you still do on Social Security Day. Some of the, not as much the older folks who earned what they make in Social Security, but people who are just getting it for nothing, they complain about how they deserve more. It's the pride of life. I deserve this. And then seeking power or position, as did Baruch, Jeremiah's helper. Remember him? God told Jeremiah to write everything down, all the words that he'd given him. So it was Baruch who actually did the writing while, as he described to the princes, as Jeremiah pronounced the words to him with his mouth. But we're not told how this came about, but God told him, "Seekest thou great things for thyself? Seekest them not." So evidently, Baruch, he was seeking some sort of power or influence or position. Maybe he was jealous of Jeremiah because everybody knew who Jeremiah was. And then Jeremiah goes and gives him a job to go read that he wrote down for him, and putting him in danger of going to jail himself. Well, thanks a lot, Jeremiah. I just want the honor. I don't want the danger. Now, I'm just supposing some things about Baruch there. But seeking great things, though, let me clarify this much. It's not altogether wrong unless you're doing it out of pride. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to climb the ladder at work, trying to get more influence or more power, trying to run things more. Maybe you feel like you can run it better. Nothing wrong with that, as long as it's not pride that's making you do it. Another example of the pride of life, putting self first. Enough said about that. Craving credit. Craving credit. Now, there's nothing at all wrong with giving, or even if it's for something they don't do. Well, I've stayed clean, I've stayed pure. So these things are each the pride of the Father. They're not of God. Who are they of? God's enemy, the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. And I know whose side I want to be on. I want to be on God's side. Anybody have anything to add to that? Very familiar verses. Every child of God ought to have those memorized. We need to have those memorized and ask the Lord to bring them back to mind every time we're tempted by one of these things, and any of the other things that go along with these, with the pride of the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Anybody have anything? All right, then we'll get ready to close. We'll pray, and then we'll give our offerings to the Lord, and an announcement or two, and then we'll get busy putting our things away. Father, thank you for these verses in the Bible and the good that it does us. I pray you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, help every one of us of Keweenaw Baptist Church, from those of us who are here for every service right down to the ones who only come in occasionally. Help us to get these things and understand them and be aware of them. And I pray that we won't be guilty of the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life. And I pray that we will please you and be in your will always. I pray now that you'll bless us as we give our offerings to you. Thank you for giving us something to give. And may it be enough. Please give us a building and make the offerings be enough to take care of that building and pay the bills. Please be with us as we put our things away. Thank you again for giving us this building to use, but keep us safe while we put our things away. And thank you for the help that so many people, just about everybody in our church, gives when it's time to clean up and put things away or get things out. I pray that you'll bless them for that. Give us a good night now. I pray that you'll bless our outreach, our tract distribution on Friday night. Help us all to partake in it. and may we get 10 tracts out, every one of us. And I thank you for it all now in Jesus' name. Amen.